Oh, yeah.
What's the rest of anything fun the rest of the time?
Okay.
Was what for that?
Yeah.
Well, actually, yeah, we're gonna be starting to do the,
Okay. Cool.
popcorn and garlic.
All right, I'm going to call the meeting of September 3rd, the special meeting on September 3rd for the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District Board of Managers to order. Are there any matters from the floor anybody would like to raise?
I think they do, but they're not going to.
Seeing none, onto the agenda. I'd like to add 2 items to the agenda. Mr. Whisker?
Sure, Shackleton managers, there's 2 items we'd like to walk on tonight that are somewhat time sensitive. One is a board discussion and decision on allowing Wenck Associates to perform some preliminary design work for the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board for Meadowbrook Golf Course. And the second is a discussion about preclusion of consultants currently being considered to do pre-development work for 325 in the Blake Road corridor for submitting on future development in that area.
Okay. If nobody has any issues with that, I'd like to add that as items 6.1 and 6.2 and just renumber everything else.
Move approval of the agenda.
Second.
With motion and second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right. Seeing no information or correspondence, I'd like to kick off our public hearing. Welcome everybody to a public hearing for the preliminary 2016 tax levy and budget for the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to solicit and consider public comment about our proposed budget and levy. Over the past few months, the Board of Managers worked with the district staff to develop program and budget priorities. Tonight, staff will present the budget and levy process, the timeline, trends, and preliminary 2016 levy and budget amounts. At this point, members of the public will be invited to present before the board and offer their comments about the preliminary 2016 tax and budget levy. But first, let's have a presentation from Mr. Erdahl.
Thank you, Manager Shackleton and managers. I'm going to provide kind of a quick overview of the 2016 budget and levy, preliminary budget and levy. And this presentation is somewhat designed for the public audience, more so than the Board of Managers, so it might cover a little bit of information that is already quite familiar to you, but I wanted to make sure that it was kind of addressing the public for this public hearing. So this is the notice that was in the Star Tribune newspaper, and also the similar information was posted on our website. The public notice that provided information about the public hearing, the amounts of the budget and levy, and kind of the details, as has been done as a standard way of doing business for the past several years. And just as a little bit of an overview, and I'll maybe shortcut this a little bit, since I don't think we have too many people in the audience that aren't familiar with the operations of the watershed district, but just to kind of familiarize people with what a watershed district does and the specifics of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District, that we manage and protect water resources in the watershed that covers 181 square miles, draining into Minnehaha Creek and eventually into the Mississippi River. We are a science-based organization that uses research and monitoring, public education, grant programs, permitting, collaborative initiatives with local governments, agencies, businesses, and residents to protect our region's lakes, rivers, and streams. We are authorized by the Minnesota Watershed District Act, and that act charges watershed districts to integrate water management efforts among cities, counties, and state agencies kind of across those jurisdictional boundaries. And the watershed districts receive funding through local property tax. So for the budget process this year, we have an open public process to review and adopt the annual budget with public input. We've kind of started that in early June, actually, when we kind of laid out the framework for this year's budget, and then with meetings in July as well. So the program managers prepare annual work plans and prepare draft budgets, and then they are for the Board of Managers review, revision, and approval. the Board of Managers eventually adopts the preliminary budget and levy and holds the public hearing, which we're doing this evening, to solicit input from the public. And then the budget will be finalized and the levy will be certified by the counties and adopted for the coming year. In terms of just the timeline for that, again, this is already familiar information to most of you here. The first half of the year, we've been preparing feasibility studies and making some plans. June through August is really that work plan and budget development period of time. This year, on July 30th, we presented kind of a comprehensive look at all of the work plans and the preliminary budget. And it was a big, thick packet that had all the work plans and the cover memos and everything else in it at that time, that we could kind of compare things across the board and came up with some recommendations from staff. After that, the board made a decision. After that, we presented also that same material to the Citizens Advisory Committee, and then on August 13th, the board approved the Joint Committee's recommendation of a 5% increase in the levy and the equivalent budget. And that brings us up to tonight, on the 3rd of September, where we're having this public hearing. Then next Thursday, on the 10th, the board needs to take action on the preliminary budget and levy, and announce December 10th as the final public comment period date. And then on September 15th, it's the certification of preliminary budget and levy to the counties is due. And then December 10th, we hold another additional public comment period. And then the official board approves the final budget and levy for 2016 in mid-December. So we talked a little bit about the historical perspective and context of the budget and levy for the watershed district. In looking back since 1995, we have kind of the trajectory, and especially in the last 5 to 6 years, there's been a little bit of a widening gap in terms of the budget on the top and the black line and the levy. And we've talked about how that's been addressed or funded through carry forward and some other things that have happened during those course of the years, and also the strong desire of the Board of Managers to maintain a relatively flat levy as the economic recovery was taking place, not to jeopardize the work of our communities and partners during that time. So specifically, since 2009, the gap between the budget and the levy was about $1.6 million. That grew over the next 5 years to 2014, where it was about $5.1 million. So that growth was, again, provided by, we had kind of excess funds that had accumulated from canceled projects, from programs that came in under budget, and from a variety of other sources. And this year we kind of came in initially with a budget that starts to kind of close that gap a little bit, because this next year is the last year when we have significant funds that will be available for that carry forward process. So looking at just kind of the tail end of that to close the gap for 2016, the proposed preliminary budget that you approved increases the levy 5%, and the equivalent budget that will make that work out in terms of our dollar amounts will be reduced by almost 10% at 9.93%. And there's still a pretty significant gap there, and we kind of defined that gap with some of the proposed carryover transfers, and we had a list of projects that we provided on July 30th that included things like the Long Lake wastewater treatment pond, Halstead Bay internal load project, Minnehaha Falls Glen project, the Minnehaha Creek regional infiltration, land restoration, Big Island, Chelsea Woods. All of those total about a little bit over $1 million. And then we also are proposing financing the Meadowbrook project rather than funding that in total. And that was also another savings of about $2.2 million. And then the balance of that will still be kind of made up in the next couple months with a collaboration between the staff and the Board of Managers to define kind of using a strategic framework of how we can approach making sure that we make cuts and reductions and postponements that will strengthen and the priority projects of the district, and still not and be able to make sure we have things under the available funds. So looking at primarily at some of the things that we are focusing on doing in the coming years in each of our 4 program areas. In education and communication, I wanted to kind of highlight some of the things for the coming year. We've developed some of these things in the past year, and then we'll be in implementation mode coming in 2016. But one of those is the Realtor Workshop that's going to launch off and provide continuing education course credit for realtors in this area. The Master Watershed Program, Stewards Program will continue to expand, and that's a close partnership with the Freshwater Society. The non-point source education for municipal officials will continue. And the cost share grant program is going to leverage in additional private investment and focus on larger scale demonstration projects in addition to kind of the shoreline and stream bank restoration projects and stormwater management programs they've done. We're also going to be looking at one of our most popular publications the district does, the Lake Minnetonka and Minnehaha Creek maps will be redesigned with new content to both kind of provide wayfinding and also new educational content. And then we're also going to be doing some reviewing of the public events and programs that we do, kind of gearing up towards 2017 and an anniversary year, and also launch of our new comprehensive plan to make sure that we have maximized the value and profile and impact of those public events. In the research and monitoring area, we're going to continue to develop and employ the E-grade evaluation program, the ecosystem evaluation program. Water quality monitoring continues as it has on 32 lake and 38 stream anchor sites. AIS watercraft inspection through cost share grants and contracts with partners. AIS early detection monitoring, including increased monitoring at Christmas Lake. The CARP assessment project in partnership with the University of Minnesota, and also the biennial follow-up of Lake Minnetonka's zebra mussel study. Some of the highlights in the planning and project area are the comprehensive plan development and implementation for the following year. Implementing some of the strategies of that comprehensive plan are already starting to be initiated and implemented, the two-track approach for focal geographies and also responsive programs and projects. The Minnehaha Creek Greenway project will continue and will be enhanced in the coming year with Powell Meadowbrook projects that manages 36 acres of stormwater runoff and restores a wetland. The Meadowbrook Golf Course stream restoration, and then the project with Knollwood Mall and Target that manages 150 acres of stormwater runoff, and kind of the I'm looking at my, sorry, I'm having a James moment here if I'm getting stammered because this isn't my latest version. I didn't have it on my computer for some reason. Sorry to make fun of you, James. The 325 Blake Road, some of the pre-proposal work that's going to be done to prepare that for future presentation. And then working with collaboration with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for 6 Mile Creek projects, and advancing the feasibility work with the Painter Creek and Painter Marsh projects. In operations and administration, this program area maintains and supports the stable information technology infrastructure of the district, with some implementation of new IT projects such as the electronic archiving system, which is a continuation project, and also the interactive map for our audiences. Continue to focus and develop more work with customer service. We've done some things in the past year with implementing credit card, accepting as for payments and some of those things. We want to accelerate those and look for some other opportunities to be more and more customer service friendly. Maintaining our government relations work, coordinating relationships with our consultants that help us with accounting, audit, legal, and engineering services, maintaining the district office maintenance and operational needs, and also processing of regular expenses. So that all brings us back to the overview of the 2016 budget and levy. This kind of shows a little bit of a comparison from the past couple of years. So the levy for this coming year of 2016 would be proposed to be $8,705,875. The budget you can see at $12,796,796,094, and then the percentages increases over prior year. Just to give kind of a little bit of a context that I think the public likes to have for the impact of that levy change on their pocketbooks and in their property taxes, looking at the kind of the typical home values of a $180,000 home, This will increase their levy related to the watershed district by 99 cents a year. And for the $300,000 home, it will be $1.59 per year increase over a prior year. And for a $600,000 year, it's a $3.73 increase over prior year.
Manager Olson?
How's the $1.59 5% of $51? Take the middle home. If you had a 10% increase, it's $5.50.
Because it
The
doesn't
perc-
include commercial industrial, just,
Yeah.
Oh, it's just the home.
just the homes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And that's the end of the presentation of the 2016 budget and levy, and we're open for public comment.
All right, thank you. I'd like to open the floor for comments from the public. And seeing only staff and members of the CAC in the audience, I think I'll close the floor, which takes us on to item 6.1. Unless managers have any questions or comments. Manager Blixt.
There was a graph towards the beginning of your presentation where you showed where you were closing the gap. That one there. What would it look like next year?
I think that's largely for you to determine, to be honest. What we have is we don't have the amount of carry forward budget going forward, so we need to kind of get to a sweet spot of about a $2 to $2.5 million gap, and that's a manageable gap for us that we can kind of manage through kind of carry forward from projects that came in under budget, from looking for grant sources, from looking for alternative ways to fund projects, from looking for savings that we can achieve through financing programs over a longer term, and some of those types of things. So we still have to narrow that gap in the coming year, whether that's done through an increased levy and or some type of a decrease in the budget is something that we're going to be looking at. I think in the coming year, or coming few months and coming year, when we put together kind of the strategic framework that looks at our mission and the programs and the projects and the tactics and the measurements of what we're doing, we're going to have kind of a clearer picture of how to assess and evaluate the kind of comparative value of what we do and how we do it to make some of those decisions from a strategic level. So that budget isn't currently determined for next year.
I understand that, but I guess I'm just kind of wondering, so, because I can't see, I guess maybe I look here. So, how many millions are in the gap right now?
It's about a $4 million gap.
A 4 million, so we have to,
It's a little bit over
So we have
8
to-
million for the levy and a little bit over 12 million for the budget.
and you're saying that a manageable amount is about 2 million, so we have to eliminate another 2 million in the next year. So is that going to be?
Perhaps. I think there's a lot of ways we could address that gap. You know, we've had some discussion about creative use of finance to look at how we finance projects long term that might be advantageous to the district. There's different projects that may or may not come in under budget, so you can kind of have some extra savings and different things that can be realized. But we have to kind of make sure we're in kind of a little bit of a correction period from about 5 to 6 years of kind of an increasing gap. So we're kind of in that a little bit of a correction period right now.
Okay, but I thought you were saying that some of the things that you just mentioned as potential solution would be part of the 2 million remaining, not the 2 million we still have to get rid of. So it sounds like, to me, it sounds like we still have to, we're still gonna need to somehow reduce it by another 2 million, roughly.
Yeah, this is,
Manager Olson has the floor. Next, sorry.
I'm just trying to.
Just
get
in terms of a quick
understanding.
response, you know, I think that as you know, Manager Blix, there might be some disagreement in terms of the amount of levy. In this year, I don't think it was a unanimous vote on the amount of levy. So there's a lot of variables. So it's hard to predict how much will increase versus, in the levy versus decrease in the budget.
I don't anticipate that it's gonna go up much more than 5% though.
Mhm.
So I'm assuming that if we do another 5%, I just wanna get a sense of, because I don't wanna make it even worse next year. I guess that's what I'm
Well-
trying to, because this year is painful enough,
Yeah.
and I just wanna make sure that we're not setting ourselves up so that next year we're in such a position that it's gonna be really hugely even more problematic. So I'm just trying to figure out if we need to make more cuts this year so that next year is more palatable. That's what I guess is my question. Is there a reason to do that?
But you're asking this,
I
we
don't-
set the policy, we set the levy, we set the budget, we set,
Yeah, I'm just trying to get the sense of,
so,
because I don't really get whether we're gonna be
do
able to
do
change.
you want to work on next year's budget now? Is that the idea, or what?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out if we
I-
need to make
I think
more
what-
cuts this year.
I think one of the things that when we
We'll
look
have to
through
do it
kind of this
next next
strategic framework of looking at our programs, I think we're going to have kind of some projections going forward 3 to 5 years. We don't have that now, and we're not going to have it probably in the next month or two to an accurate degree, but we can look at that more now. My understanding is that this is kind of, in terms of putting an annual budget in context and looking at the past several years and the next several years, my understanding is that hasn't really been done significant in a kind of real meaningful way in the past. And so that I think we're trying to get a clearer picture both of where we've been to get here today, and then to your point, going forward, we're going to have to manage that too. But right now, I think that in terms of figuring out the reductions to programs this year, next year, or in future years, I think you need to do that closer to the time when those changes need to be made to be more informed, and they have to be strategic so that we're making sure that the priorities that you determine have the resources to fulfill them.
Okay, well, I'll just wait and see if I can figure it out as we go forward.
Manager Olson?
Go back one slide, please. When we narrowed that gap one more, it looks like. There we go. When we narrowed that gap to 0 back in 2001, it looks like, between 2000 and 2002, there was a great big move to change. And that,
37%.
yeah, what was the situation back then?
I can't do.
That was the Blue Water Commission, wasn't it?
I was
Manager
here
Blex?
and I will address that. The issue was that we added a ton of projects at that time, and the thought was, the philosophy of the board in terms of the huge increase was that because they were just cost for projects, it wasn't for administration and general operating, that it was justifiable to the public because it was going to be, a kind of a one-time thing, and then, it would, and that we had a pretty significant discussion about whether we wanted to have a levy that was going to be kind of steady state, or whether we wanted to just kind of go up and down based on our projects.
Okay.
And we decided that it was justifiable to the public to say, yep, we have a $2 million project, and we can justify the cost of that expense to the public.
Manager Mellon?
I think it was not using all the resources and tools you had available, and you weren't presented with enough choices on how to.
Well, in terms of
Yeah.
financing, probably so, but at the time, that was the decision, is that we were going to.
Well, it wasn't a good decision in terms of how normal local units of government run, because you don't fund city halls with 1 year's levy, and you don't fund bridges and paving and everything with 1 year's levy. So
Well, let me just say that the way that financing for watershed districts actually changed significant in statute after that time, and we did have limited resources.
No, it didn't.
Well, I know that they did.
Just to pull the conversation back to our budget and
But
levy.
I think, no, this is, you know, this is relevant, because we've got a sophisticated staff that's planning with all the tools we have available, all the partners that are available, and many different sources of funds. And I think, you know, we as a board have been encouraging this and promoting it, and I think we're seeing the benefits now with where we're taking on these bigger projects and don't have the impact on property taxes, and that we spread the costs over all the beneficiaries in the future, rather than all the, well, I guess the typical speech would be all the elderly and poor today, you know, spread the costs over, because they're the ones that suffer the most consequences. The $180,000 homes, you know, it might be $1 a year, but everybody's putting $1 a year on them, and, you know, they're on fixed income and all that. So I think we're being responsible to, and you know, I don't think we've had the scrutiny of the budget in the past as much as we've had this year. I mean, this was really an intense program, I felt, where we actually knew the sources and the uses and examined all the programs, and I feel quite good about the process we went through. And you know, we'd like to be able to have an unlimited budget, but you know, that's not a realistic approach. And you know, there's choices, and I think we've made good ones.
Okay. I was reminded that according to new statute, there is something that must be said before the public hearing ends. The board agenda for its second November meeting, or its first, actually the December 10th meeting, must include a public meeting for public input on the district's budget and levy, which will be adopted in September. So there will be another opportunity for the public to comment prior to the final adoption of our budget and levy, and that will happen on December 10th.
December 10th.
Yep.
When?
December 10th.
December 10th.
December
Okay.
10th. Yep. And with that, I will close the public meeting. And so, item 6.1 and 2, or Mr. Whisker?
Certainly.
Chair Shackleton, managers, I think this item before you is pretty straightforward. The Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board's requested the ability to directly contract with Wank Associates on pre-design work for the Meadowbrook Golf Course. And when I say pre-design, specifically performing an environmental assessment worksheet and conducting phase 2 environmental work for the site. Under Wank's professional service agreement with the Watershed District, it's generally prohibited from working with municipalities within the Watershed District without a waiver from the administrator. But given the pending project, its profile, and the proposed collaborative approach or partnership for Meadowbrook Golf Course, district's councils recommend that the board be advised on this proposal of the park board to contract with Wank, and that you be provided an opportunity to comment, and generally we're recommending that you agree and support this recommendation. The main reason for not allowing Wank to routinely do that is just so that we retain their ability to do permit review. And in this instance, neither the EAW or Phase 2 are regulatory documents that the Watershed District approve. And under the professional services agreement that Wank would enter into under this arrangement with the park board, the warranty of the work, both the EAW and the Phase 2, would also run to the district. So, as you know, we're proposing on having a public hearing on this project moving forward in the next several weeks, and after that, if the board decides to order, there'd be a cooperative agreement presented that would outline the design framework and how both parties choose to collaborate. The reason this is before you now is mainly time. The park board wants to get going on these preliminary environmental documents so that they can keep the project on schedule, and Wank is obviously reasonably uniquely qualified. They've participated in all the preliminary concept development, familiar with the site, and they can move on an EAW in phase 2 very quickly, so that's advantageous to the park board. So staff and council are generally recommending that this is low risk and something that shouldn't cause a problem, but they'd also recommended that you be informed.
Manager Olson?
So this could have been approved by the district administrator without comment from us, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you for keeping us informed.
Do you need a
Do you
motion?
need,
I think that would be great for the record.
Move approval of the staff recommendation.
Second.
there's been motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you. Item 6.2.
Okay, Chair Shackleton, managers, last week during the review and authorization to enter a cooperation agreement with the Hennepin County HRA, Manager Miller had raised a question of should consultants that we're currently contemplating working with to do pre-development work, if that group of consultants includes a developer, should they be precluded from submitting development proposals in the future to actually actively develop the watershed district site at 325 Blake Road. And the question was raised at the time largely, I think, around the perception that that may create in the development community in terms of one particular developer being uniquely qualified to develop their site because they did pre-development work, and that limiting the quality, diversity of proposals that we might get in the future, and thereby diminishing or impacting the value. And the reason we want to consider that question tonight is it's time sensitive, and it was actually raised in a different context outside of the meeting by Hennepin County and the Hennepin County attorney. So just a little bit of background. As you know, under previous agreements authorized by the board, the watershed district is contemplating entering into a three-party agreement with Hennepin County and the city of Hopkins to do pre-development work for the Blake corridor. It includes our site and some other sites in the area to look at how to look at urban design and development massing and development modeling, and how different land use products would be configured over these spaces over time, and then run those through different financial models and pro formas. So this is kind of pre-development work that allows the city and the district and the county to make informed decisions about what might happen in this corridor in terms of development. We've gone through the process as a group with the county and with the city of issuing a request for proposals, and we've started reviewing those proposals and recently conducted a couple of interviews for 2 finalist groups. And during a discussion with staff at between the county and the district and Hopkins recently, Hennepin County noted that their attorney had raised not a risk of perception and value, but actually a legal risk regarding this question of preclusion. And they'd basically asserted that there is a window of risk created by selecting a developer now and not contemplating the preclusion, because if a consulting group that is working on this project for us now includes a developer, and in the future that developer is selected to develop the site, other developers could claim that they were not treated fairly and that they would have some reasonable legal claim, and that would create risk for everybody involved. Their recommendation to their staff on how to address that legal risk were really twofold. They said the standard approach is really a preclusion, and that's used routinely. Preclude any developers that are actively paid consultants doing this pre-development work from submitting a proposal in the back end to actively develop the site. Or second, there could be a discussion or around a public open process that involves much more of the development community. We don't know exactly the details of how that would work. And that would not necessarily eliminate all the risk, it would just manage it a little bit more, because you'd have a more open and inclusive process. And that isn't really something that's been contemplated up until this point, wasn't part of the request for proposals process that we've been through. So we asked Lewis Smith to speak directly with the Hennepin County attorney and provide us with his opinion. He's recommended to the board going the route of preclusion, specifically for some of the legal issues, but I suppose it would address Manager Miller's concerns raised previously. And so this is really for the board's consideration. The language that he provided me, should you so choose, would be to preclude any developer that directly participates as a paid consultant in the process to perform this pre-development work that would inform our request for development proposals, then offering a proposal to actively develop the site in response to any future RFP we issue as an organization for 325 Blake Road.
So, that's all, I'll make that motion.
Second.
There's a
Good
motion.
motion.
There's a motion and second. There's a motion and second. Well put, Manager Blix. Manager Olson.
So we are going to be hunting for this preliminary design consultant?
We've already issued a request for proposals. We've reviewed 4 sets of proposals, 4 different teams, and we have interviewed 2 finalist groups. And a decision is yet to be made, which is why this is time sensitive, because in all fairness and transparency to the people that have proposed, we want to inform them before they sign a contract if they're going to be precluded from work in the future.
Okay. Are all of them also involved with a developer phase of their business?
The 2 groups that we have interviewed are LHB, which is a design engineering firm, and they have partnered with CB Richard Ellis, a real estate company. And they do have a wholly owned subsidiary that is a developer. And they're not at the table as part of the proposal right now. So it's CBRE and LHB. And the other group is an aggregation of Shorgan, Cunningham, Tangible, and Cornerstone, with Cornerstone out of that group being an active developer.
So would they, in an effort to win the developing contract, would they pull their proposal now?
We don't know that. There's been, following the interviews, Hennepin County staff did mention to both of the teams that this was something that was actively being discussed and a decision hadn't been made. And both teams said they would have to evaluate, whether or not they would proceed. So they haven't provided concrete feedback whether they're in or out. So it's your decision.
So based on how we vote, we could see all of those proposals just evaporate.
Not the CBRE one.
I wouldn't think so. CBRE is not that active in development in the Twin Cities. They're mostly a brokerage and a management and real estate consultant. And the other firm is, the other group has a firm that just is a developer.
Yeah, and I think to maybe address Manager Olson's point, unfortunately, hindsight being what it is, this is something that the 3NT should have discussed and probably included in the request for proposals to keep things cleaner. But Hennepin County attorneys weighed in, and Lewis has talked to them and provided his feedback today, which I'm sort of delivering on his behalf to the board. And if we'll have to sort of cross the bridge of what happens based on your decision one way or the other and go from there.
Do you have any feedback from Hopkins
On
this issue?
we've had the discussion that I think they recognize the legal risk that's been presented, and we've articulated that there was a concern raised about not just the legal risk raised by Hennepin County, but how it might influence her value. And they kind of wanted to know which way the board might lean on the issue, and I said the decision came up sort of late in the hour at a last meeting, and it was set aside for future consideration. And they had asked that we bring it back as quickly as possible for you to consider.
Any other discussion?
Is there a shorthand way of rereading the motion?
I can do that.
Could you? Thank you.
So the motion would be to preclude any developer that directly participates as a paid consultant in the process to perform pre-development work that would inform future requests for development proposals from then offering a development proposal in response to an RFP that the Watershed District might issue for 325 Blake Road.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes. Anything else to come before this special board meeting? Then we're adjourned. And I believe we were supposed to reconstitute a joint Operations and Programs Committee and Planning Committee upstairs in the Big Island room
For the purpose of,
for the purposes of an interactive map demo and to get our new iPads.
Okay.